session with me.
Hi, before we start, I want you to imagine something. You're cleaning out your phone. Old screenshots, old messages, old photos. Then you find a voicemail, 19 seconds long, and your thumb freezes above the delete button. Not because you're still in love, not because you're waiting for them to come back, but because a tiny part of you is afraid of what happens after it's gone. Tonight's story is about a woman who kept one voicemail for 11 years. 11. She listened to it on birthdays, after breakups, during moves, on nights she couldn't explain. The strange part isn't that she kept it. The strange part is why. And when she finally told someone the real reason, it wasn't the reason anyone expected. I'll let you hear part of it later. But first, you need to know how it got there. I'm Clara, and this is a closure session. Let's begin. They'd met in university. In a lecture hall, neither of them can remember the subject of anymore. Only that they'd ended up sitting next to each other by accident, and stayed that way for 2 years afterward. He was the kind of person who remembered small details: her coffee order, the name of her childhood dog, the specific anxious habit she had of tapping her thumb against her leg before an exam. She used to think that noticing was a kind of love language all on its own. And for a long time, with him, it was. They spent those 2 years doing all the ordinary, unremarkable things young couples do. Late nights in the library that turned into late nights somewhere else entirely. A shared umbrella that only one of them ever remembered to bring. An entire shelf of inside jokes that had accumulated so gradually neither of them could point to when they started. She used to think, without ever quite admitting it out loud, that this was probably what people meant when they talked about meeting someone at the right time. They'd promised each other it would be fine. Video calls, time zone math, flights home for holidays. The kind of promises two people make when they're young enough to believe distance is just a logistics problem, not an emotional one. For the first few months, it mostly was fine. Calls at strange hours. Long voice notes recorded on the way to work, just to hear each other's day. She kept a running list in her phone of small things to tell him. A joke from her coworker, a strange dream, a song that reminded her of a memory only they shared. The way you save up little pieces of your life for a person you're used to handing them to in real time. And then, slowly, the way these things go, the calls got shorter. The time zones stopped feeling like an inconvenience and started feeling like an excuse. She noticed it before he ever said anything. The particular quiet of someone pulling away without deciding to announce it. Do you know what he did? The week everything actually ended? He didn't call to end it. He left a voicemail. She was at work when it came in. 19 seconds. Recorded probably in a hurry, in a language that was technically an apology, but functioned more like an exit. Hey, I've been thinking a lot lately, and I think we both know this isn't really working with the distance. I don't want to do this over a message, but I also don't know when we'd actually get to talk properly. I'm really sorry. I hope you're okay. Talk soon, maybe. Talk soon, maybe. 2 words that meant nothing and everything at once. She played it 4 times in a row, standing in the break room, before she could even process what had actually happened. Not a phone call. Not a real conversation. A voicemail, left specifically at a time he must have known she couldn't answer. Whether on purpose or not, she never knew. And that not knowing became its own quiet wound, layered on top of the first one. She remembers the strange, disjointed details of that day more clearly than almost anything else from that entire year. The fluorescent hum of the break room lights, a coworker's laughter drifting in from the hallway, the way the coffee she'd been holding had gone cold in her hand without her noticing. She remembers replaying the message a 5th time, quieter, headphones in this time, as if listening more carefully might reveal a different ending hidden somewhere inside the same 19 seconds. It never did. It was the same message every time. Talk soon, maybe. She went home that night and didn't tell anyone for 3 days. Not because she was ashamed exactly, but because saying it out loud, he ended it in a voicemail, would have made it fully real in a way she wasn't ready for yet. 2 years after that voicemail, she still hadn't deleted it. She told herself it was for closure at first, that she'd delete it once she'd truly moved on, as if the deletion itself was meant to be some kind of ceremony marking the end. But 2 years came and went, and the voicemail stayed exactly where it was, buried in an app she barely used anymore, resurfacing occasionally in a storage almost full notification that she'd swipe away without ever addressing the actual file sitting inside it. She'd play it sometimes, late at night. Not because she missed him exactly. By then, she genuinely didn't. Not in any way she could still name. But because there was something about hearing that specific voice, saying those specific words, that had become its own strange ritual. Proof, maybe, that it had actually happened. That she hadn't imagined the whole relationship into something smaller than it was. By then, she dated other people. A few relationships that lasted months. One that lasted almost a year. Each one perfectly fine and perfectly forgettable in its own way. She used to wonder, sometimes, whether she compared them to him without meaning to. Not because he'd been better, exactly, but because he'd been the last person whose ending had felt unfinished. And unfinished things have a way of staying louder in memory than things that closed properly, the relationships that ended cleanly, with real conversations and real goodbyes, seemed to fade naturally, the way memories are supposed to. This one didn't. This one just sat there, preserved, 19 seconds long, refusing to decompose the way the rest of that year eventually had. Do you know what it's like to notice that one specific ending has stayed sharper than every other ending since? Even the ones that hurt more at the time. She used to think there was something wrong with her for that. Some flaw in how she processed loss. It took her a long time to understand it wasn't about severity. It was about the absence of a real conversation. Endings with words attached to them get to become memories. endings without them get to stay open wounds, technically, indefinitely, no matter how much time passes on the calendar. She used to test this theory, almost without meaning to, whenever a new relationship ended. A boyfriend at 24 who'd sat her down properly said honestly that he'd realized he wasn't ready for anything serious, apologized for wasting her time, wished her well, and meant it. That ending, painful as it was in the moment, had faded within a year into something she barely thought about at all. It had closed the way a door is supposed to close. She could remember the relationship fondly, without flinching, the way you're supposed to be able to remember most of the people who've passed through your life. The voicemail never got that treatment. It just sat there, unprocessed, exactly as raw at year 9 as it had been at year 1, because nothing had ever actually closed it. 5 years after that, she moved apartments. In the process of transferring her phone to a new device, there was a moment, one single tap, where she could have simply not restored that particular voicemail, left it behind in the old backup, the way you leave behind mismatched socks and expired spices when you move. She restored it anyway. You'd think that would have been the moment she finally asked herself, why? It wasn't. She restored it the way you restore a habit you've stopped questioning, automatically, without examining it. Because the alternative required a kind of decision she wasn't ready to make yet. The new apartment had better light, a shorter commute, a fresh coat of paint on every wall. Everything about that move was meant to signal a clean start. And somewhere in the middle of boxing up her old life, she'd carefully, deliberately, made sure one small, unresolved piece of it came with her anyway. She didn't examine that contradiction very closely at the time. It's easier, in the moment, to just keep moving boxes. But the real moment, the one I mentioned at the beginning, hadn't happened yet. That one came 11 years after the original voicemail, in the most ordinary way possible. A mutual friend's engagement announcement showing up in her feed, tagging people from that old life she barely thought about anymore. Curiosity did what curiosity does. She looked him up, not obsessively, just once, the way you check a weather forecast you don't really need. And there he was, married. 2 years, apparently, according to an anniversary post from his wife. A child in the more recent photos, maybe 8 months old, held up to the camera with the specific, exhausted joy new parents have. He looked happy. Genuinely, uncomplicatedly happy. In a way that had nothing broken or unfinished about it at all. She scrolled further than she meant to. The way you always do once the first click is already made. Photos from a wedding in some sunlit courtyard she didn't recognize. A honeymoon somewhere with white buildings and blue water. A nursery being painted a soft yellow in a video his wife had posted with a caption about finally feeling ready. Every photo was ordinary, in the best possible way. The kind of ordinary that comes from a life that had simply continued, uninterrupted, exactly the way lives are supposed to when nothing is secretly still broken underneath them. She noticed, almost involuntarily, the exact number of years on the anniversary post. 2, and did the mental math without meaning to. He'd met his wife roughly a year after the voicemail. Roughly a year after ending things with a message he couldn't say out loud. He'd apparently found someone he could say everything out loud to, easily, without any of the hesitation that had defined those last months with her. That specific detail landed harder than the wedding photos themselves. Not that he'd moved on, but how quickly, how uncomplicatedly, as if whatever had made honesty so difficult with her simply hadn't been an issue with someone else at all. She sat with her phone for a long time after that, feeling something she hadn't expected to feel. Not jealousy exactly, not even sadness about him specifically. Something closer to a strange kind of vertigo. The realization that for 11 years, some quiet part of her had been carrying an unfinished chapter that, for him, had apparently finished a long time ago. Cleanly, without any lingering voicemail-shaped scar tissue attached to it at all. Here's the part that surprised her most, if she's honest. She'd always assumed, somewhere underneath everything, that the ambiguity of that ending meant it was still somehow unresolved between them, that the vague, talk soon, maybe, had left a door open. Even a small one, even one neither of them intended to walk back through, seeing his life settled, full, entirely uninterested in that old door. She understood for the first time that the door had never actually existed anywhere except in her own head. He'd closed it completely, years ago, the moment he pressed send on that voicemail. She was the only one who'd kept it propped open this whole time. This was the moment. The one from the beginning. Not the voicemail itself. Not the years of half deciding to delete it. This. A stranger's engagement post. A happy photo of a man who used to be someone else to her. And the sudden, clear understanding that she'd spent over a decade waiting for a closure that, on his end, had arrived on day one. She thought about all the nights she'd played that voicemail, searching it for some hidden second meaning, some clue she might have missed the first 100 times. There had never been a hidden meaning. It was exactly what it sounded like. A young man, in over his head, ending something the easiest way he knew how, and then, evidently, simply living the rest of his life afterward, the way people do. He hadn't spent 11 years wondering. He'd spent 11 years building an entirely different life, one that had nothing to do with the version of himself who'd once recorded those 19 seconds. Emotional pain doesn't just live in your memories. It lives in your body, in habits, in the small, automatic decisions you make without examining them, like restoring a voicemail during a phone transfer without asking yourself why. That's not a character flaw. That's simply what unprocessed pain does when it isn't given somewhere real to go. She opened the voicemail app that night for what would turn out to be the last time. She didn't listen to it again. She just looked at the file. 19 seconds. Dated from a summer that felt impossibly far away now. and pressed delete. It didn't feel dramatic. No music swell. No sense of a weight instantly lifting. It just felt like something quiet and overdue. The way it feels to finally throw away a plant that died months ago and you just stopped looking directly at. Maybe you have your own version of that voicemail. Not necessarily an actual recording. Maybe it's a text thread you've never deleted. A photo you can't quite bring yourself to remove. A birthday reminder for someone you haven't spoken to in years that still, quietly, makes your stomach drop every time it pops up. Do you know what keeps most people holding on to something like that? It's rarely still about the person. It's about what deleting it would mean. Admitting fully that the story is actually over, not just paused. Maybe, like her, you've quietly assumed that some ambiguity in how things ended meant a door was still technically open. Somewhere, even one neither of you ever intended to walk back through. And maybe, also like her, you'll eventually find out, through a mutual friend, an old photo, an update you didn't go looking for, that the door closed on their end a long time ago, and you were the only one still checking whether it was locked. I want you to hear something, and I want you to actually let it land, not just pass over you. Time doesn't heal this on its own. You healing it, a little, on purpose, tonight, is what heals it. Holding on to a voicemail, a message, a memory, isn't healing. It's just a very quiet way of staying exactly where you were the day it happened. You don't need them to still be thinking about you for what you had to have mattered. It mattered. It was real. And it's allowed to be finished now. Even if you're the only one who ever formally closes it, letting go doesn't mean it didn't matter. It means you've decided your future matters more than your past does. So here's what I'll leave you with tonight. Whatever you're still holding on to, whatever small, specific thing has become its own quiet ritual of not quite letting go, you're allowed to delete it. Not because it wasn't real, because you've carried it long enough, and you're allowed to set it down. You don't need a big moment for it. No music swell, no dramatic goodbye. Sometimes closure is just a single, quiet tap on an ordinary night when you finally decide you're ready. And if you're not ready yet, that's allowed too. She carried hers for 11 years before she was. There's no schedule you're supposed to be keeping to. There's just the moment, whenever it comes, when holding on finally starts to feel heavier than letting go. Let it be quiet now. Let it be finished.
Thank you for being here with me tonight. I hope you're feeling calm and relaxed.